There's someone in your life right now who's lying to you. Not the small lies we all tell. The dangerous kind. The kind that rewires how you see reality. And here's what keeps FBI behavioral analysts awake at night. You probably think you'd recognize it. You wouldn't. Because the best manipulators don't look like villains. They look like the person you trust most. They sound reasonable, caring, even concerned about you. But agents who interview criminals for a living, people who've sat across from serial killers, cult leaders, and con artists, they've identified 7 behavioral red flags that appear in almost every manipulation scenario. 7 patterns that scream danger while everyone else hears charm. In the next 35 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what they see. My name is the Yarn Keepers, and I study the darkest corners of human psychology. Not because it's entertaining, because it's necessary. Here's what most people don't understand. Manipulation isn't random. It's not some mysterious dark art. It's a repeatable formula that's been documented in thousands of criminal cases, cult investigations, and FBI behavioral reports. The techniques used by a charming sociopath at your office? Nearly identical to those used by Ted Bundy. Different scale. Same playbook. I've spent years analyzing case files, forensic psychology research, and interviewing techniques used by federal agents. And I've noticed something disturbing. While law enforcement knows exactly what to look for, the general public is dangerously unaware. That changes today. We're going to break down 7 manipulation red flags that FBI agents are trained to never ignore. These aren't theories from some psychology textbook. These are field-tested warning signs that have helped agents identify predators, prevented catastrophic outcomes, and saved lives. Here's how this works. For each red flag, I'll show you the psychological mechanism behind it, how it appears in real situations, the specific warning signs to watch for, and most importantly, how to protect yourself. This isn't about becoming paranoid. It's about becoming aware. Because the uncomfortable truth is this: predatory personalities rely on your ignorance. They count on you dismissing your instincts. They bet on you being too polite to call out the behavior. And statistically, they're usually right. But not after today. Let's begin. And once you know these signs, you'll never be fooled again. You meet someone. Within hours, sometimes minutes, they're treating you like you're the most important person in their universe. They share deep secrets. They ask penetrating questions about your life. They create this sense of profound connection that normally takes months to develop. It feels magical. Destiny even. FBI agents call this accelerated intimacy, and it's one of the most reliable predictors of manipulative intent they've ever documented. Here's why it works. Human beings are neurologically wired to reciprocate emotional disclosure. When someone shares something vulnerable with you, your brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. You feel compelled to share something back. It's automatic. And manipulators exploit this like a master safecracker exploiting the combination. But here's what makes it insidious. It feels genuine in the moment. Your instincts are screaming that something's wrong, but your emotions are flooding with connection chemicals. The manipulator knows this. They're counting on your chemistry overriding your logic. Magnifying glass tilted left the reality. Let me give you a real-world scenario. You start a new job. Within the first week, a colleague takes you aside, shares that they're going through a difficult divorce, tells you they've never connected with someone this quickly, and asks about your relationship history. Seems harmless, right? Maybe even flattering. Here's what an FBI agent would notice. This person just loaded you with emotional debt before you've even learned their last name. They've created a false sense of mutual vulnerability. And now, when they ask you for something, your password, confidential information, to cover for them, refusing feels like betraying a friend. This pattern shows up everywhere. The romantic partner who says, "I love you," after 3 dates. The new friend who trauma dumps in the first conversation. The coworker who treats you like a lifelong confidant within a week. The timeline is the tell. Warning: the warning signs. Watch for these specific markers. They share intensely personal information before you've asked. They use phrases like, "I've never told anyone this," or "I don't know why I trust you so much," very early. They mirror your interests with suspicious precision. It's like they've studied your profile. They push for rapid escalation, frequent texts, demands for your time, pressure to commit to plans or decisions. And here's the crucial one. They're irritated or hurt when you maintain appropriate boundaries for the timeline. If you pump the brakes, they make you feel like you're the problem. The defense. Trust the timeline, not the feeling. Genuine connections develop gradually. Authentic people respect your pace. If someone's pushing intimacy at warp speed, ask yourself, what are they trying to bypass? What's the rush? The counter strategy is simple but requires discipline. Deliberately slow things down. Maintain your boundaries. Don't match their disclosure level. And watch what happens. A genuine person will understand. A manipulator will push harder, guilt you, or suddenly withdraw all that special connection energy. That's your answer right there. You point out something that doesn't add up. A story that's changed. A promise that was broken. Facts that contradict each other. And somehow, you end up apologizing. This is what forensic psychologists call reality distortion, and it's the cornerstone of every long-term manipulation relationship. The person shows complete immunity to being caught in contradictions. Not just denial, something more unsettling. They rewrite history with such confidence that you start doubting your own memory. Here's the psychological mechanism. It's called gaslighting, though that term's been overused to the point of meaninglessness. What we're really talking about is cognitive warfare. The manipulator isn't just lying. They're attacking your capacity to trust your own perception of reality. And FBI agents know, anyone who can do this without flinching has done it many times before. It's a trained skill. Magnifying glass tilted left the reality. Picture this. Your partner explicitly tells you they'll be home by 6. At 9 p.m., they stroll in. You say, "You said 6. They respond, "No, I said I'd try to be home around 6-ish. You're always putting words in my mouth. Why are you trying to start a fight?" Notice what happened? The contradiction isn't addressed. It's redirected. Suddenly, you're defending yourself for bringing it up. Or consider the boss who promises you a promotion in writing. 3 months later, you ask about it. "I never promised anything. I said we'd discuss the possibility." You're being entitled. The records say otherwise. The emails exist. But they're so confident in their rewriting of history that you start wondering if you misunderstood. That's not a misunderstanding. That's weaponized denial. Warning the warning signs. They have a phrase arsenal ready. "That never happened. You're remembering wrong. You're too sensitive. Everyone agrees you're overreacting." They refuse to acknowledge objective evidence. When cornered with proof, they attack your character instead of addressing the facts. Most tellingly, you find yourself constantly second-guessing your memory around them. You start keeping notes or recordings just to trust yourself. That's not paranoia. That's your instincts screaming at you. If you need documentation to prove reality to someone, you're not in a relationship. You're in a hostage negotiation. Shield the defense. Document everything. I'm serious. Keep receipts, screenshots, emails. Not because you're paranoid, because they're counting on you having no proof. But here's the real protection. Trust pattern over incident. One contradiction? Maybe a mistake. A pattern of contradictions with aggressive denial? That's character, not confusion. And here's what agents know. Never try to convince them. You're not dealing with someone who needs more evidence. You're dealing with someone who needs you to doubt yourself. The moment you realize you're arguing about basic reality, you've already lost. The only winning move is to stop playing. They don't lock you in a basement. That's not how modern isolation works. Instead, they systematically poison your relationships. Your best friend? She's always been jealous of you. Your family? They don't understand what we have. Your support system? They're toxic. You're better off without them. FBI agents see this pattern in every case involving long-term control, cult recruitment, domestic abuse, trafficking situations, financial exploitation. The playbook never changes. You can't manipulate someone who has strong external support. So the support has to go. The psychology here is brutal in its simplicity. Isolated people are controllable people. Without outside perspectives, you have no reality check. Without alternatives, you have no leverage. Without support, you have nowhere to go. And the manipulator knows this on an instinctive level. Magnifying glass tilted left, the reality. It starts subtly. Your new partner always has a concern right before you meet friends. They're tired. They're not feeling well. Can't you just stay in? Just this once? Then it escalates. They point out small things your friends say that sound passive-aggressive. They emphasize incidents where your family didn't support you. They position themselves as your only true ally in a world that doesn't appreciate you. Before you realize it, you've stopped seeing people. Not because you were forbidden, that would be obvious. Because every social connection comes with so much tension, so much analysis afterward, that it's easier to just stay home. That's engineered isolation. Or consider the workplace version. A manager who discourages you from networking. Who subtly suggests that your colleagues aren't really your friends. Who makes you feel that loyalty means exclusivity. You wake up one day and realize, the only person who influences your reality is the person who benefits from controlling it. Warning: the warning signs. They have strong negative reactions to your independent relationships. They always find something wrong with the people who care about you. They position every social interaction as competition for your time. They make you feel guilty for wanting to maintain your support network. They also do this. They isolate you geographically, suggesting moves away from family, encouraging job changes that limit your social circle, creating situations where you depend on them for transportation, money, or housing. Physical proximity is control. Shield the defense. Maintain your relationships no matter what, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when they make it uncomfortable. If someone truly cares about you, they want you to have support. They encourage your connections. They're secure enough to know that love isn't a zero-sum game. Here's your litmus test. Introduce them to the people who know you best. Watch how they behave. Do they charm? Do they try to win over your support system? Or do they find reasons to avoid those meetings, then criticize those people afterward? And remember, anyone who wants to be your only source of validation is telling you exactly what they're planning. Isolation isn't protection. It's preparation. There's always an emergency. Always a crisis. Always something that needs your immediate attention, your resources, your emotional energy. And strangely, the crises always seem to happen right when you're about to establish a boundary, take space, or question the relationship. FBI behavioral analysts call this crisis manufacturing, and it's one of the most sophisticated manipulation tactics they encounter. Because here's what makes it brilliant. You can't prove the crisis is fake. Maybe their car really did break down. Maybe they really are having a mental health emergency. Maybe their family really is in trouble. But the timing is never coincidental. The psychology is simple. Crisis creates urgency. Urgency bypasses critical thinking. When someone you care about is in distress, your protective instincts override your judgment. You rush to help. You table your concerns. You put your needs aside. And when you've been conditioned to respond to crisis, you become reactive instead of reflective. You stop asking whether this pattern is healthy. You're too busy putting out fires. Magnifying glass tilted left, the reality. You decide you need space from a relationship. Within hours, they're in the hospital. Or their parent is dying. Or they're suicidal. Or they've lost their job. Or they've been in an accident. The first time, you rush to help. Of course you do. You're a good person. The second time, you notice a pattern, but you dismiss it. Surely you're being paranoid. By the 10th time, you realize, every single moment you've tried to establish independence, a catastrophe has conveniently appeared. Or consider the workplace version. Every time you're about to request fair treatment, your boss suddenly has a project crisis that only you can solve. Your dedication is tested. Your loyalty is measured. And somehow, the conversation about your boundaries never happens. This isn't bad luck. This is strategic distraction. Warning: the warning signs. Crises correlate suspiciously with your attempts at boundaries. The emergencies are always severe enough to demand response but vague enough to avoid verification. They have an endless series of external problems but never take steps to solve underlying issues. Most tellingly, their crises require your specific intervention. Not a therapist. Not their family. Not emergency services. Always you. That's not need. That's manipulation. Shield the defense. Offer resources, not rescue. That sounds serious. Have you called 911? You should contact a therapist. Your family would want to know about this. A genuine crisis involves accepting appropriate help. A manufactured crisis requires your specific emotional labor. And here's the hard truth. You cannot love someone into stability. If every interaction is an emergency, that's not a relationship. That's a hostage situation with emotional ransom. Watch what happens when you refuse to engage with crisis mode. A person in genuine distress accepts appropriate support. A manipulator escalates until you break. The pattern tells you everything you need to know. They can be incredibly empathetic, deeply moving in their understanding of your pain. They cry at movies. They rage about injustice. They seem more sensitive than most people. But here's what FBI agents notice. The empathy has an off switch. When it serves them, they're the most compassionate person you've ever met. When it doesn't, they're capable of cruelty that takes your breath away. And they can flip between these states so quickly that you start wondering if you imagined the cold version. You didn't. This is what forensic psychologists call cognitive empathy without effective empathy. They can intellectually understand emotions well enough to manipulate them, but they don't actually feel them. It's performance, not connection. And the performance is flawless, until it's not. Magnifying glass tilted left the reality. They comfort you through a loss with words so perfect they could be poetry. You think, this person truly understands me. 2 weeks later, they're dismissive about something that devastates you. They laugh at your pain. They tell you you're overreacting. It's like talking to a completely different human being. You're confused. How can the same person be so empathetic one day and so callous the next? Here's how. The empathy was never real. It was strategic. When they needed to bond with you, they performed compassion. Now that you're attached, the performance isn't necessary. The mask slips. Or watch how they treat people they don't need anything from. Wait staff, service workers, people they perceive as beneath them. The cruelty is casual. Reflexive. That's their baseline. Everything else is acting. Warning the warning signs. Their empathy is dramatically inconsistent. They're compassionate about issues that make them look good but indifferent to your actual pain. They cry about abstract suffering but show no remorse for harm they've caused you directly. They also do this thing. They're exceptionally skilled at knowing what emotional response is expected, but there's something performative about it. It's too perfect, too practiced, and most damning, they show no empathy when you establish boundaries. Your needs become character flaws. Your pain becomes manipulation. Your hurt becomes evidence that you're the problem. Real empathy doesn't evaporate when it's inconvenient. Shield the defense. Judge people by their empathy floor, not their empathy ceiling. Anyone can be compassionate when it's easy, when it's visible, when there's an audience. The real test is, how do they treat you when you're inconvenient? When you need something they don't want to give? When showing empathy costs them something? And here's what agents know. Watch how they treat people they have power over. That's who they really are. Everything else is impression management. If their kindness has conditions, it's not kindness. It's investment. And eventually, they'll expect a return. Red flag number 6. The victim identity weaponization. 24:00-28:00. Pushpin the concept. They're always the victim. Always the one who's been wronged, betrayed, misunderstood, persecuted. Their ex was crazy. Their former boss was toxic. Their family mistreated them. Everyone in their past has somehow failed them. And here's the pattern FBI agents never miss. If everyone in someone's history is a villain, they're probably not the hero they're presenting themselves as. The psychology here is brilliant. Victim status is social currency. It generates sympathy, lowers defenses, and makes questioning them feel like cruelty. Who challenges someone who's suffered? Who doubts someone in pain? A manipulator, That's who. So they position themselves as the victim, and suddenly, examining their behavior becomes victimizing them all over again. It's a defensive shield made of sympathy. Magnifying glass tilted left the reality. They tell you about their crazy ex, who made false accusations. Their abusive family, who never understood them. Their toxic workplace, where they were unfairly targeted. You believe them. Of course you do. You want to be the person who finally treats them right. But then you notice, they never take accountability for anything. Every conflict has the same structure. They're blameless, everyone else is cruel, and they're perpetually shocked by the betrayal. Eventually, you realize you're walking on eggshells. Because any disagreement, any boundary, any attempt to address their behavior, it all becomes evidence that you're just like everyone else who hurt them. The victim role isn't about healing. It's about control. When you can't criticize someone without becoming their abuser, they've weaponized their past against your present. Warning: the warning signs. They have an exceptionally long list of people who wronged them. They show no pattern of self-reflection or growth from past relationships. Their version of events always casts them as completely innocent. They also use their victim status strategically. The moment you have a legitimate complaint, they escalate to their trauma. You wanted to discuss their behavior? Now you're talking about their childhood. You needed an apology? Now they're having a breakdown about how everyone abandons them. The conversation never stays on your needs. It always returns to their pain. And here's the critical sign. They're comfortable with you sacrificing your well-being to manage their feelings, but they're never willing to modify their behavior to protect yours. That's not vulnerability. That's manipulation with a trauma filter. Shield the defense. Compassion for someone's past doesn't mean accepting abuse in your present. You can acknowledge their pain without tolerating harmful behavior. These aren't contradictory positions. If someone uses their trauma as an excuse to avoid accountability, they're not healing, they're weaponizing. Here's your test. Can they hear about your pain without making it about theirs? Can they take responsibility for impact, even when intention was innocent? Can they work on changing patterns? Or do they just expect endless understanding? Growth looks like, I'm sorry. My trauma isn't an excuse. I'm working on this. Manipulation looks like, after everything I've been through, I can't believe you'd attack me like this. See the difference? Past suffering doesn't grant future immunity from accountability. And if they can't separate those concepts, they're not safe to be close to. This is the big one. The pattern FBI agents say is the single most reliable predictor of dangerous relationships. They test your boundaries. Small violations at first. Nothing you'd call them out on. Then bigger. And bigger. And the entire time, they're measuring. How much will you tolerate? How far can they push? What does your resistance look like? Behavioral analysts call this testing for compliance. Because here's what predatory personalities understand. You don't go from zero to major violation. You condition someone gradually. You normalize small transgressions until massive ones feel inevitable. It's the boiling frog method, and it works because human beings adapt. We rationalize. We minimize. We don't want to overreact to small things. And manipulators exploit that impulse until your boundaries are completely eroded. Magnifying glass tilted left the reality. First time, they show up at your house unannounced. You're uncomfortable, but you let them in because you don't want to seem rude. They just learned, unannounced visits are acceptable. Next, they go through your phone as a joke. You protest weekly. They say you're being paranoid. They just learned, privacy violations can be reframed as trust issues. Then, they make decisions that affect you without asking. They dismiss your concerns. They tell you you're being controlling when you object. They just learned, your autonomy is negotiable. Each violation is slightly worse than the last. Each time, they gauge your reaction. And if you don't enforce consequences, they recalibrate what's acceptable. This isn't accidental. This is systematic desensitization. Warning: the warning signs. They forget or misunderstand clearly stated boundaries repeatedly. They treat your boundaries as suggestions or starting points for negotiation. They use your past flexibility as evidence that boundaries don't matter. They also test in specific ways. They do something you've said you're uncomfortable with, then observe whether you enforce consequences or just express discomfort. Discomfort is tolerable to them. Only consequences matter. And critically, they escalate after you enforce a boundary. They push harder. They punish you for saying no. They create so much conflict around your boundaries that maintaining them becomes exhausting. That exhaustion is the goal. When enforcing boundaries is more painful than violating them, they win. Shield the defense. Enforce first-time boundaries like your life depends on it. Because it might. FBI agents know, someone who respects your no the first time will respect it the 100th time. Someone who pushes back on your first boundary is showing you their entire playbook. Here's what this looks like. You say no. They push. You repeat, I've already said no. The conversation is over. They push harder. You enforce a consequence, I'm leaving now. Or, this conversation is done. Or, if you continue, I'm blocking your number. And then, this is critical, you follow through. Because manipulators don't believe your boundaries until they hit consequences. Words mean nothing. Actions mean everything. Your boundaries aren't mean. They're not selfish. They're not negotiable. They're the terms of your availability. And anyone who can't respect them has already told you who they are. So let's bring this home. 7 red flags. 7 patterns that FBI behavioral analysts use to identify dangerous personalities before anyone gets hurt. Instant intimacy that feels too good too fast. Contradiction immunity that makes you doubt your own memory. Isolation that masquerades as protection. Manufactured crises that conveniently control your time. Selective empathy that disappears when you need it most. Weaponized victim status that prevents accountability. And boundary violations that escalate until you've forgotten you ever had any. You might be thinking, but what if I see these signs and I'm wrong? What if I'm just being paranoid? Here's what I'll tell you. The cost of being wrong in one direction is awkwardness. The cost of being wrong in the other direction is losing yourself. Trust your pattern recognition. Not one incident. Not one bad day. But patterns. Consistent, repeated behaviors that accumulate into a picture you don't want to see. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Your instincts are usually right. That feeling in your gut that something's wrong? That's not paranoia. That's millions of years of evolution screaming at you to pay attention. Manipulators count on you ignoring those instincts. They count on you being polite, giving the benefit of the doubt, not wanting to seem judgmental. But agents who interview predators for a living will tell you, the victims who escaped early all said the same thing. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to believe it. Don't be that person. Awareness is your weapon. Boundaries are your armor. And the willingness to walk away, even from someone you love, even from someone you've invested in, that's your ultimate protection. You're not responsible for fixing broken people. You're not obligated to stay in relationships that damage you. And you're not cruel for protecting yourself from someone who refuses to respect you. Remember, a person who truly cares about you will never make you feel bad for having boundaries. They'll never isolate you. They'll never rewrite reality. They'll never use crisis to control you. And they'll sure as hell never test how much abuse you'll tolerate before you break. So watch for these 7 red flags. Recognize them early. And when you see them, believe what you're seeing, not what they're saying, not what they're promising, not who they could be. Who they are is in their patterns. And patterns don't lie. If this information could help someone you know, share it. Because the only thing that stops manipulation at scale is mass awareness. The more people who know these patterns, the less power those patterns have. Until next time, trust your instincts. Maintain your boundaries. And never apologize for protecting yourself. You deserve relationships that feel safe. Not relationships that make you question reality.